Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Blitz Sports Media. I'm Ryan Linkler. I'm back with my co-host Brady Penn. We're on the third episode of our series, breaking down each position for you guys ahead of free agency, giving you guys some of the top players available, where we think some of the best fits are, and going from there. We're on the wide receivers part / tight ends, aka our pass catchers here. This is a pretty deep class, Brady. I think there's a lot of solid options in this class that could fill in and potentially be really solid options for teams as a wide receiver, two, wide receiver three, whatever it is at that point. We'll see. Well, let's get into the honorable mentions in this series. We got some good options here between Demarcus Robinson, Zach Ertz, Elijah Moore, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, Mike Gesicki. All these players, can be really good impact players. I forgot to mention Dyami Brown, too, another solid option there. All these guys are solid pass catchers that could be really valuable options. What names stick out on the list for you?
Yeah, these honorable mention type guys. I already just looked at two tight ends here, Tyler Conklin and Mike Gesicki. We've seen Conklin have some success in New York, actually more success, I think, without Aaron Rodgers. I had him as a guy that could go to the Rams with Tyler Higbee being almost 33 years old, I believe. Could see the Colts, they're in need of a tight end, the Panthers. And then for Gesicki, I mean, he's on the Bengals. He could stay in Cincy, but if he leaves, I'm thinking Broncos. Also, maybe the Rams and maybe even the Bears. Cole Kmet really hasn't been the most impressive tight end. Could see Gesicki fitting in that type of offense. And then with the receivers, you mentioned Dyami Brown. I think Patriots, Steelers, Titans, any place where he has a chance to get still number 2 type volume of targets. I think that he will head there and obviously try and get a payday as well. I'm not sure if he will return to Washington or not because I think he may try and capitalize on the really good postseason that he had after being kind of, a really under-the-radar guy and exploding. I think he had like the second most receiving yards in the playoffs, and I think he could capitalize on that.
Yeah, 100%. I do think it's interesting what's going to happen with some of these markets. Demarcus Robinson's been a consistent option on a lot of different playoff teams throughout his career. I think that, as a good option, he could fit in as a solid wide receiver 3. I think he has that continuity between the Rams, Chiefs, and the Ravens. I think all those are good fits. As far as Zach Ertz and Tyler Conklin go, these are veteran guys that can fit in. I think with Ertz, he was really good in Washington as a mentor. I think he'll be good once again. And then Tyler Conklin he was good with the Jets. I think the Jets will probably just wind up retaining him. The guy I look at on this list is Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Man, this guy was a touchdown machine last year, caught 9 touchdowns, was a deep threat. Obviously, with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, his volume was never consistent, but he is a deep threat, and some teams that are, better than the Titans could look at that and say, ooh, this guy was pretty good with the Titans last year. I wonder what I could do with this guy here on my team. I think the Chiefs and the Bills are two teams that I look at and say, oh, that guy's got some talent with him. We might be able to get him as a steal. Dyami Brown is another guy that you mentioned, the Patriots. I wouldn't mind him back in Washington. He really proved to be that, solid option for them, this past year. And then Elijah Moore as a slot receiver, he hasn't necessarily panned out like the talent suggested he would at that point, but he's been a solid player as well. I do want to mention before we get into this top 10 list, there are 3 big receivers that are available in trades that we won't be mentioning: Devontae Adams, Deebo Samuel, Cooper Kupp. These guys are not free agents, so we don't necessarily have a ranking for them, but they are clearly available this offseason. It's going to be interesting to see if they are cut candidates or they'll wind up being free agents this offseason. But heading into our list at number 10, Deontay Johnson, the man himself who could not find himself a home. Brady, where is he ending up?
I didn't even do a write-up on this guy. I'm not going to lie. He's a lost cause at this point. Dude's been on like 8 teams in the last 2 years. He'll end up somewhere and do nothing and next.
So tied for 10th place, then Mike Williams. What do you think of Mike Williams?
I think Mike Williams is interesting. I think Mike Williams is a good 50-50 guy, or at least solid 50-50 guy that can be a wide receiver 3 in your offense. I think the Jets expected him to come and be a wide receiver 2 before they brought Devontae in. I think bringing in Devontae was a corrective measure of overestimating Mike Williams. But for Williams, I could see him in an offense like the Cowboys. I could see him go over to Carolina, trying to give Bryce Young as much assistance as possible. And I could see the Giants as well, pairing him on the other outside of the field with Malik Neighbors on the other side. So I think that Mike Williams could be back in New York, similar to what I said about Sam Darnold and our quarterback issue, but just with the other team, Cowboys, Panthers, also teams to look at for him.
Yeah, it's interesting. As far as Mike Williams goes, I think just after the injuries that he's had with the Chargers, he just is not the same player. And last year we saw that. Didn't necessarily find his footing with the Jets or the Steelers. I think he is just a rotational piece. Could see him be depth in a lot of different places. If a team needs a big-bodied receiver, he still can be that. He didn't lose his height due to his injuries. He still has that part to him. And then as far as Deontay Johnson goes, it's the most confusing player in the NFL. We went into last year thinking, man, this guy's a really solid option. The Panthers got lucky signing him, for what they did. Played pretty well in Carolina, all things considered, with where this offense was at the time. Gets traded. We're like, oh, that's a really solid trade. The Ravens are going to benefit. Absolute chaos happened from that point on. Ravens cut. Texans cut. Re-sign with the Ravens at the end of the year. Who knows what's happening with this guy? He's been a locker room problem. Reportedly now in the second half of the year for not getting enough targets, not getting enough reps, whatever it is. Deontay Johnson's had that problem, and that's probably going to scare some teams away this offseason. The talent is there. Deontay Johnson proved in Pittsburgh he can be a solid option. We'll see if that ever materializes. I could see the Ravens retaining him or the Browns. To be honest, it's low risk, high reward for the Ravens of retaining him. Who knows if they can get anything more out of him. They already know what to expect out of him, and I think the Browns have the ability to take a shot at Deontay Johnson at receiver. Let's get to number 9 in the rankings. DeAndre Hopkins, coming off of his second half with the Chiefs, first half with the Titans. Brady, where do you view DeAndre Hopkins this offseason?
Hopkins, man, I think that I'm not really sure if he's going to chase the money or try and get a ring. I know we saw him get traded to Kansas City, but before that, he kind of chose the money over there in Tennessee. I think the Saints honestly could be in play if he goes the money route.
Such a Saints player.
Exactly. Like, guy that used to be really good. It's kind of washed now at this point, but was like a big name. Yeah, that is a Saints type move. I think the Ravens could be a spot for D-Hop if they want to add more depth on the outside over there to kind of take some pressure off of Zay Flowers. And I think that the Rams are also a fit with Cooper Kupp getting out of there. I know they're trying to get a little bit more youthful, but I think that him as a number 3 receiver, if they can add somebody else maybe in the draft and then have Puka Nacua and DeAndre Hopkins in that offense with the spacing and pass game that they have, I think it could be a good match. And I think that he could end up back in KC too. Here's what I'll say before we even get to Hollywood Brown. I think the Chiefs will retain one of these two guys. It's just a matter of which one.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. I think Hopkins or Marquise Brown will be back in Kansas City. Who knows which one? I think, Hopkins at this point in career, he's a mentor. I feel like that's his biggest attribute to the team. A lot of people attribute Xavier Worthy's growth in the second half of the year to DeAndre Hopkins, and that obviously has benefited the Chiefs a lot. He was good with the Chiefs, and he just didn't really, necessarily get the volume or the reps in the second half of the year that he had. And it was interesting. I don't necessarily know what to think about that. He doesn't separate at the rate he once did. He's really good against zone coverage. He obviously has some of the best hands in the NFL. But Hopkins is just not the same player. I could see the Texans. I could see the Bills, Chargers, Ravens making a mix. I think at this point he has been to a Super Bowl. He kind of understands now, what that feeling of getting close feels like. I think at this point he's going to chase a ring versus the money, and I'd be surprised if he chases the money at this point in his career. Heading into number 8, Darius Slayton from the Giants. Honestly, one of the more underrated options on the free agent market. Hasn't always been able to carve out a role for the Giants, but he's had these spike games, Brady, that we've been like, oh, this guy Darius Slayton can play some ball. What do you think about him?
I really didn't look into him a whole lot either. I think he'll probably end up, getting maybe a team where he can get a little bit more targets than if he tried to go be on a good team. A Titans type, a Saints type would apply for him too. Like, just one of these kind of bottom feeder teams where he can get a decent amount of money and targets. But I'll let you take it away from here because I didn't really.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Bengals are an option I look at. I think he could be a cheaper replacement to Tee Higgins if he walks this offseason. A similar build, similar style of receiver in that regard. I think he'd be a good fit there. I think the Panthers could be in the market for him. The Rams potentially. The Rams are going to be in the market for a receiver. I'm going to keep mentioning the Rams a few times for these receivers. They're going to be looking to replace Cooper Kupp this offseason. I don't know. It could be through the draft. Could be with the free agency. We'll see what happens, but I think Slayton fits in there with as well. I think Buffalo could be interesting. Could be a fit for Amari Cooper if Amari Cooper doesn't come back. So we'll see. The Patriots as well could be in the market for a guy like Slayton if Tee Higgins does not work out. We'll see what happens. With number 7, Juwan Johnson, Saints tight end, the best tight end available on the market. Johnson, hasn't necessarily had an ideal quarterback situation for a majority of his career. What is your take on Johnson? Is there any chance he's leaving New Orleans?
I doubt it. They probably keep him around. I mean, he's been a solid tight end, and they don't really have a whole lot of direction right now, so they're probably going to try and retain as many of their free agents as they can without really being an appealing spot, especially with a new head coach. So I think he's probably staying put.
Yeah, I think he's staying put for sure. I was going through and I'm like, man, you really can't mock many teams for Juwan Johnson. I think he's a Saint through and through. The only other team I thought of, the Denver Broncos, are in the market for a tight end. They've been trying to get a tight end for a long time at this point, and I would probably be through the draft. We'll see if that happens. Tyler Warren is probably going to be their pick, but we'll see if that winds up materializing. But I think Juwan Johnson is back in New Orleans. Let's get into number 6. Now we're getting into some meaty names here. Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's a free agent, and to be honest, Brady, I feel like there's only 2 options for him.
He said it himself. He literally said this like a month or 2 ago. He's either staying in Chicago or going to the Chargers. So that's from his own mouth. That's what I'm going with.
That's the exact 2 teams I'm going with, the Bears and the Chargers. He lost a step this past year, though. He wasn't the same player.
It wasn't just this year. It was already in motion. People just didn't want to see it with the Bears hype last year.
He was really good in 2023. Like, really, really good. That was one of his best seasons of his career. He's not fast. He's never been fast. It never looks pretty. He's just a very good route runner. He's open, and he's just a veteran, right? I don't think he's more than a wide receiver 3 at this point in his career. And Rome Odunze, if he does return to Chicago, is ahead of him. If he turns to Los Angeles, he's the wide receiver 2, but I don't know if you're necessarily excited about that by any means. I think he should be a wide receiver 3 on a team at this point.
I honestly think he ends up staying in Chicago because even if he wants to go back to LA, like, he's a slot guy. They're going to be like, hey, bro, we got Ladd McConkey in the slot. We're good. Like, we don't need you.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I was thinking with some of these options. I'm like, man, the Chargers need another receiver. Oh, slot guy. That ain't going to work out. Let's get into number 5 here. Amari Cooper. Now, Brady, this was a disaster in Buffalo. It never panned out. Why did it not pan out? And what are some good fits for Amari Cooper heading into next year?
I just don't think that it was a good fit. I don't think that his style really equates with Josh Allen that much. I think that he was useful in certain spots, especially the regular season game against the Chiefs when it was a more downfield passing attack. He got open a few times. I don't think Amari Cooper is completely washed. I mean, 2023, we did see him with Joe Flacco put up some crazy games. But I don't think that he's ever going to be the Amari Cooper that we saw for a long time. I think the Patriots are a team to look for as a rebound if they can't get Higgins, maybe bring him in as a number 2, number 3 type of guy on a 1-year deal. I think the Commanders are a team to look at. And then same angle as I kind of had for Mike Williams with the Panthers. I think the Panthers could be another spot where Cooper ends up to help Bryce Young out.
Yeah, I don't think the Bills are going to retain him. I just don't know if it worked out. I think he's going to get $10+ million for sure. And if you're Buffalo and you're sitting there, they have a tight cap situation at this point. There's no point of paying him that money for a wide receiver 4 in their offense. I think teams like the Raiders, Patriots, Chargers, Panthers, all teams that could be in the mix. The Chargers are the one that really interests me, I think, from a competition standpoint and money standpoint. They can go pay a guy like Cooper. And then in the scheme, he's a downfield threat a little bit more, a different type of receiver compared to Ladd McConkey. He's not the same player he once was, but I think he has more in the tank than he showed in the second half in Buffalo. I'm betting on a bounce-back season for Cooper. I just think it's not going to be in Buffalo this next year. We'll see what team that's for.
Honestly, you keep talking about the Chargers. It's hard to keep up with. It always going back and forth and backtracking things. I think if he becomes available, the Chargers wide receiver needs to be fully focused on getting Tyreek Hill over there.
Whew, that's lofty, though. That's lofty.
Yeah, but I think they could make it happen if he becomes available. And also, who wouldn't want to see the storyline of him facing the Chiefs twice in the year? Because he'd probably say something crazy leading up to it, or some bulletin board type material. So that's what I want to see, is the Chargers go hard after Tyreek Hill.
It'll be. I mean, we don't even know. Like, we're gonna get sidetracked here for a second. Like, I did my Dolphins offseason preview. They would be so much better off financially, team building wise if they moved off from Hill now versus moving off of Hill a year or two later when he's still going to be upset.
And he's like low-key holding you hostage because it's like you can't really start your offseason until you know whether he's in or not. So
it'll be interesting. I just don't think I think the Tyreek Hill Miami situation just didn't work out. I mean, obviously from a number standpoint, hasn't been bad by any means for Hill, but just not a good fit for winning necessarily.
Well, he prioritized the stats and the money over the winning, clearly. So
yep, exactly. All right, number 4, Hollywood Brown from the Kansas City Chiefs. This is one of the most intriguing players this offseason. Barely got any time in the regular season. We really don't know, what to expect out of Marquise Brown at this point. What are you thinking this offseason? Is he still a player that can be a plus wide receiver too?
Yeah, so I mentioned that the Chiefs either keep Hopkins or Brown, in my opinion. But I think Brown is going to definitely take a look at his options, because the Chiefs, they're not the only contender in the NFL. And this is another guy where is he going to want to, kind of make some money after an injury season? This might be his last chance at a real payday. We don't really know how he thinks in that regard, but we've seen Josh Allen has been recruiting Hollywood Brown, supposedly, has a lot of interest in bringing him to Buffalo. And I see a lot of Chiefs fans, especially on Twitter, that are like, "Oh, that's ridiculous. Why would he ever go there? Why? What is his pitch? Come over here so you can lose to us?" I don't think it's that simple. I think that the Bills are closer than a lot of Chiefs fans would like to admit, especially if they can fix their defense. That's really been the problem in these games. But if they can add a Hollywood Brown with Shakir and Curtis Samuel on that offense, that's a lot of guys that aren't necessarily alphas, but are really fast receivers that are good in space. So I think that that's legitimately a possible destination. I think the Patriots are a possible destination, but one team that I think, especially if they trade their current wide receiver too, I think the 49ers would be a great spot for Hollywood Brown.
Ooh.
In the Kyle Shanahan offense, utilizing his speed with a healthy Brandon Ayuk back, who's going to need to get acclimated at the beginning of the year. I think Hollywood Brown would be a great under-the-radar signing for the 49ers.
Interesting. That one is surprising. I was not expecting. I was expecting you to say Rams, and then you said 49ers, so that was surprising. But Hollywood Brown, what's interesting for me is I feel like he has unfinished business with the Chiefs, and that's partly not due. It's not due to them losing a Super Bowl. It's due to him not playing any games in this offense with Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. This was supposed to be an explosive passing attack from 3 really fast yak type receivers. They never got to see it once. And I feel like that has a little bit of, something in his mind that, he's like, man, we really could have been special with these 3 players. And we all saw how Xavier Worthy panned out towards the end. Rashee Rice will be back at some point next year. We'll see what Brown is going to demand in the market. I feel like that's going to depend a lot if he's back in Kansas City. He only actually signed for $3 million with the Chiefs this past year. And I don't think it's going to be that cheap again this offseason by any means. And what's interesting about the Bills, right, is I think he honestly gets more volume in Kansas City than he would in Buffalo. Because in Buffalo, you're fighting for Keon Coleman down the field. You're fighting with Curtis Samuel down the field. You're even fighting with if Mac Hollins, which returns to Buffalo, which I think he will. He was a good fit in Buffalo. Number 13 always seems to perform very well in Buffalo. I think the Bills will make a competitive offer for Marquise Brown, but I think we need to look out for teams that are desperate for wide receivers if he's going to go away from Kansas City. And those teams include the Patriots, the Panthers, and the one team that's really, really going up on my radar is the Dallas Cowboys that could be in the market for Hollywood Brown. He reminds me of Brandon Cooks in many different ways. He's not as good as Cooks is, but he is a down-the-field threat that can, stretch the field opposite of CeeDee Lamb, and the Cowboys are desperate to find a guy that can pair with CeeDee Lamb, and I think Hollywood Brown could be that guy. Let's head into the next player on our list, Stefon Diggs. Diggs was, not bad by any means, nowhere near where he used to be at the top of the league, but is still a really good player in the NFL. Torn ACL, don't know what we're going to get. Still the 3rd-ranked receiver on our list here. What's Stefon Diggs' outlook looking like?
I think he's going to the Cowboys. His brother plays for the Cowboys. He's the same type of personality that, like you mentioned, Jerry Jones would bring in. They need another receiver with CeeDee Lamb, and he's already in Texas too, so it wouldn't be some crazy move for him. If he doesn't go there, though, I think the Chiefs are a possible team if they were.
Oh, that would be drama. Holy.
Yeah, I think that's a legit team that he could go to, though, if they lose Hopkins and Brown. But I think the Raiders are another team that, that's a team that would overpay for, oh my gosh, it's Stefon Diggs. We've got
Yeah.
another weapon, like something like that. So
I think
I'm
Diggs is definitely going to demand money too.
yeah, I don't know if he can though. Like at this age, coming off a torn ACL, like he will get a decent contract, but he's not going to be able to be like, demanding with his contract. I don't think. But I think he's a Cowboy.
Cowboys are a great fit. I have them as well on my list. I think the Texans will probably try to retain him. He was a good fit with Houston. I think he didn't like, obviously, Nico Collins being a little bit more of that alpha over him, but him and CJ Stroud had a pretty good connection, and they were pretty solid. I think Diggs still has a good amount left in the tank, maybe 2 to 3 years of really good football left potentially in him if he bounces back from this ACL. Well, the Packers are a team I'm looking at. They need to get a bigger name wide receiver to go along with their nice pieces at receiver. I think that's a name that can really help them in that way. The Cardinals are another team I'm looking at, and the Chargers as well. I think the Chargers are a good option for Stefon Diggs. Number 2 on the list, Chris Godwin, another player coming off an injury. Godwin has been one of the most steady players in the NFL, never among the top receivers in terms of ranks, but he's always consistent. He's always producing great slot receiver. Where is he going to end up, Brady?
Yeah, I do think he's going to leave Tampa. I think the Broncos could be an outside option. I think the Steelers are in the mix. And then you mentioned the Packers. That's one of the teams that I have here for Chris Godwin is Green Bay with that slot guy over the middle. Obviously keep Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs on the outside there and have Chris Godwin work in the slot. I think bring a good veteran presence to a really young wide receiver room. I think the Cardinals are another team that Chris Godwin could be involved in. It really depends on what the offensive play calling situation is this year and how they use Marvin Harrison. Because here's what I'll say. Marvin Harrison was at his best working from the slot this year when the Cardinals did that. Now, they didn't do that a whole lot. They kept forcing him on the outside. He wasn't doing quite as well as he did in the slot. We'll see how that goes. If they plan to play him more in the slot, I think they won't go towards Chris Godwin. But if they keep wanting him to develop as an X receiver, I think there's a chance they could bring in Chris Godwin to the desert.
Yeah, I think, Godwin's going to be a hot name. And what makes it so interesting is that prior to the injury, I think it was a clear thing that the Bucs were going to try to retain him at all costs. Jalen McMillan emerged, Brady. He really emerged as a solid option, and they don't necessarily have to bring him back. And it might be better to invest in other positions than necessarily retain Godwin for the money he deserves this offseason. He still is on the right side of 30. There's going to be a lot of teams interested, and one team I'm really looking at is the Washington Commanders. They are in need of a slot receiver. They have the money to go get a guy like Chris Godwin. I think he'd be a great fit alongside Terry McLaurin in that offense and Jaden Daniels. We saw many different Commanders receivers perform very well in this offense. I think Chris Godwin has a role in Washington that could be really good. I think the Panthers are an option. Cowboys could be an interesting option, but CeeDee Lamb also plays a lot in the slot, so that's interesting. Then there's obviously the Bucs. I think, Chris Godwin has a lot of love for that city, has, re-signed there already, so we'll see what we're going to get. But, I mean, there's a market for Chris Godwin, and he's going to get a good amount of money this offseason. And then the number one player that everybody's talking about this offseason, Tee Higgins, Brady. What is going to happen with this saga?
I know the Bengals want to bring him back. I don't think they're going to be able to, man, especially with what Jamar Chase rightfully has earned and is going to want. I don't think I know Joe Burrow thinks that he's able to play GM and he's like, oh, well, we can just do all this deferred money. We get you are not the Dodgers. You're a small market team with bad ownership. You're not going to be able to pull the strings like that. I'm sorry, Joe, but you're just not. And at that point, comes down to a couple things for Tee Higgins. Obviously, he's going to get paid the most out of any wide receiver in this group. I think that's no question. But what are the gaps in money going to mean to him? Because the Chargers, the Commanders, they probably can't offer quite as much as New England can, but they can offer more proven winning here in the last year, 2 years. Obviously, the Commanders made the NFC title game. The Chargers made it to the playoffs in a year that they really weren't supposed to, and they won 11, 12 games, something like that. Patriots had a really bad year, but they have the most cap space in the NFL. They have the number 4 draft pick in the NFL. They have Drake May, who's proven to be a really, really good quarterback prospect, and they want to put as much help as they can around him. So I think that there's a chance that we see the Patriots give him an offer that he just can't refuse to go and play with an uber-talented quarterback. Obviously, he came into a team that was in a similar situation to the Patriots where they were really bad, but they accumulated draft picks. They signed a couple of good players, and they were able to explode early on with that quarterback in year 2. I'm not saying that Drake May is Joe Burrow. That's to be determined, but I think that could happen. But I also think that Chargers and Commanders with those winning angles are very appealing for him as well. So I'm not even going to make a prediction on where I think he's going, but these are my 3 teams: Patriots, Chargers, and Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, for the Bengals to retain him and Jamar Chase, I mean, Jamar Chase is coming back to the Bengals 100%. But to retain Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase, you're basically saying, look, we're going to have to win games 35-31, just like that every single game. It's going to be a similar style of defense that the Bengals played, unless they hit on every draft pick. That's just a horrible recipe for building a team, and it's incredibly risky. The Bengals offense will be all right without Tee Higgins in it. They still have Jamar Chase. They still have Joe Burrow. They will be okay. If they save $25 to $30 million not paying Tee Higgins, they can invest that right into their defense, improve their defense, give themselves a better chance at a Super Bowl. Look, it's really fun to put up offensive numbers when you're in a shootout every game, but what's more fun, competing for a Super Bowl or going 9-8 and, having one of the top offenses in football? It's about winning, right? If you're the Bengals ultimately as an organization, and letting Tee Higgins franchise tag him, trade him, give him a massive contract for whatever it be. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if they're going to be able to franchise tag him again, because the tag will be a lot of money and no team's going to want to take that on. So they might be in a really bad spot leverage-wise because of that. And in the offseason, I think almost 24 to 28 teams are going to be bidding on Higgins, and that includes some of the Bengals' biggest rivals. I'm sure the Bills will hop in. I'm sure the Chiefs will hop in, right? But it is going to come down to money for Tee Higgins. The Patriots have a ton of money. Commanders have a ton of money. The Panthers have a ton of money. There are so many teams that Tee Higgins could possibly land. And to be honest, we won't get a better read on this until a week or two before free agency, and we can make a calculated decision on where the money's ending up and what Tee Higgins is thinking. All in all, though, Brady, we got a ton of wide receiver and tight end free agents. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. Definitely could be some league-changing moves here. And who knows, this could have an impact like the running back position in 2024. We will see. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you guys tune in to our trenches preview of the offensive line tomorrow, and then we got defensive line and edge rushers after that. So keep staying tuned to all these previews. Hit that subscribe button for more content, and we'll catch you guys next time.
We'll see y'all later.